sit down.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Toy Talk. And this month I want to take some time to talk to you about dreams and goals. And as I was studying this subject, I came across a quote I really liked. And it said, "Dream small dreams. If you make them too big, you get overwhelmed and you don't accomplish anything. If you set small goals and accomplish them, it gives you the confidence to go on to higher goals." Now this quote was by a man named John Harold Johnson. He was an African-American man that was born in Arkansas in 1918. And of course, at that point in this country, there was a lot of racism and segregation. And John had a hard life. He was from a poor family. His grandparents were slaves. They had been brought over to America as slaves. His father was killed in a sawmill accident when he was 6 years old. And his mother had trouble, keeping finances together for the family throughout the years. And in the midst of this, John placed a great value on education. However, because of segregation in Arkansas at that time, the African-American school only went up to 8th grade and John was no longer allowed to continue his education. Rather than quitting, he decided to repeat the 8th grade a second time. And it was at that point that he and his mother took a trip to the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. And while they were at the World's Fair, they realized there was more opportunities in the North for African Americans than there were in the South. So they picked up their family, and John, along with his mother and his stepfather, moved to Chicago in 1933 in hopes that his parents would find better jobs and that he'd be able to continue school, which he was able to do. In Chicago, the schools were still segregated. However, there was a high school for African Americans. Now, John enrolled. However, the other students gave him a very hard time at first. They teased him mercilessly because of his ragged clothes and because of his country ways, the way he spoke and the way he acted, the way he walked, different things. But John says he just took that as a way to urge him on, to prove to them that he was better than what they thought he was, that he was not uneducated, that he was not dumb. And by the time he had graduated, he had become the student body president, the student council president, the editor of the yearbook, and the editor of the student newspaper. And because of his accomplishments in high school, John was offered a full tuition scholarship to the University of Chicago. However, he thought he was going to have to turn it down because he would not be able to afford housing and food and books and other things. But again, because of his accomplishments in school, he was invited to speak at a dinner for the Urban League. And it was here that a man named Harry Pace saw him and was so impressed that Harry offered him a job at his company. Harry Pace was the president of Supreme Life Insurance Company. And, he started out as an office boy, and within 2 years, Johnson had rose to the point that he was the personal assistant to Harry Pace. And he was doing all this while still going to school. And he says he would, at night, he would go to school, and at night he would study self-improvement books. He would practice public speaking, doing things that he felt would improve his life. And while he was working there at Supreme Life, he got the idea that he wanted to make a magazine like Reader's Digest, but he wanted it geared toward African Americans. And so he wound up leaving the company and starting the Johnson Publishing Company. And he did release a magazine like that. It was called the Negro Digest. And after pursuing Eleanor Roosevelt and getting her to do an article for the magazine, it became very popular, reaching about 100,000 people with each issue. And as time went on, John Johnson ended up publishing the two most popular African-American-based magazines of all time, Jet and Ebony. And in 1982, John Harold Johnson became the first African-American man to ever appear on the Forbes 400 list. He's a true American success story. But getting back to the quote, I really like what it says about setting small goals. And it reminded me of a time in my 20s when I took up jogging. I started going out there and I'd set these goals. All right, I want to get out there and I want to run 5 miles. And I would get out and I'd start going and I wouldn't make it. And I'd start getting frustrated. I wasn't accomplishing the goal because the goal was too big. And then one day I went jogging with a friend that had been jogging for quite a while, for several years. And I asked her, all right, how far are we going to go? And she said, to that pole. And she pointed at a pole just a little ways ahead. And I said, what do you mean the pole? She said, well, this is what I do. I pick a spot that I can see in the distance, and I say I'm going to make it to there. And once I accomplish that, I pick another goal. And I said, man, that worked for me. I started doing that. I looked and I said, all right, I'm going to jog to that pole. And I did. And then I jogged to a car in the distance or to a street sign. And before long, I was jogging 5 miles with no problems at all. Because what I believe happens when you set these small goals and accomplish them is you train your brain to expect success. And that's what I was doing. And as I read this quote, it brought this all back to me. And it's even changed the way I'm setting goals now in my life once again. Now, I have some goals in my personal life and my physical body. For quite a while, I've been saying I want to lose some weight. I want to get down to 180 pounds. And the goal was there, the big goal of 180 pounds. And I will lose weight for periods of time, and then I'll kind of plateau and start getting frustrated that I'm not losing more, and I'll gain some back and lose some and gain some. And I've done the yo-yo thing for years. So what I've been doing now is I set a goal and I said, all right, this was set about a month ago. And I said, I want to set a goal where I lose 10 pounds by the end of April. It's a realistic goal. It's a goal I know I can hit. And once I accomplish that, then I'll set another one. And there's other things in my physical life. I've said several times on Toy Talk that I walk with a cane. And I've been doing that for 7.5 years. And about 2 months ago, I was able to get a lift put into one of my shoes, which now balances out my body. And I set a goal. At that time, I said, I want to be able to walk without a cane by the end of April. And by the beginning of January, about a month later, I was walking without a cane, and I haven't walked with one since. And, I've still got a ways to go. I've got a new goal now that by the end of the summer, I want to be able to walk a mile without a cane. I'm setting these small goals that I know I can hit. And as I get from one, I'll move to the other and move to the other and move to the other. And you keep moving forward. And again, you train your brain to expect success. Now, the part of the quote that I did not like as much was set small dreams. Now, I don't think there's a problem with having a big ultimate dream at the end as long as you're setting small goals to reach it. Like my weight goal, it's 180. That's the big goal, but there's small goals heading toward the big dream. Now, ultimately, my dream in life is I want to be a New York Times best-selling author. And I want to be able to go out and speak to groups of people, which, authors are often invited to address people. I want to write books that teach people and inspire people in a fun fictional setting. Now, I've had some success in this. I have 2 books published, and I've just recently finished a 3rd one. And now I've looked and I've said, all right, my big dream is still there, the goal to become a New York Times best-selling author. But let's step back and set smaller goals along the way. And my new goal at the moment is obviously, first of all, write every day, do some research every day, something I've already done. But my next goal now is to find a solid publisher or a solid literary agent. That's the next step. And as I move on from there, I'll set the next one. And what I want to encourage you to do right now, even before we go to commercial, take some time, think about what it is you want to accomplish, and then set a goal. Put a little time limit on it. I want to be able to do this by this time. Now, even before we go to commercial right now, grab a pen and paper, grab a tablet, whatever you need, and take a moment. Jot down what a goal is you want to reach. You can put down your ultimate dream goal at the end, but what is the first step you want to take in getting toward that goal? We're going to cut to commercial, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with your Toy of the Week.
Imagine a 15-minute shopping spree in your child's favorite toy store. That's right, up to $1,000 of Mego toys absolutely free. Just look for this Mego 8-inch Superheroes display. Fill out this sweepstake coupon or a 3x5 card and mail to this address. That's not all. Buy his favorite 8-inch superhero and get this poster free. But act now. Offer ends June 30th. Look for this superhero display at your local toy store.
In 1984, most superheroes had been around for decades. But the world was changing and children were ready for a new breed of crime fighter. Striking at just the right time were 2 Dover, New Hampshire residents, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Not having an open door to DC, Marvel, or any of the other comic book labels that dominated the genre, the 2 opened their own company, Mirage Studios. Only able to afford a black and white layout, the 2 moved forward in releasing their creation. And it turned out to be a huge success. featuring 4 teenage martial arts trained reptiles. Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo took the world by storm, releasing comic books, TV shows, movies, and a massive line of toys. The group we're speaking of is obviously
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half shell, turtle power.
In this segment, I want to take a few moments to talk about a man that I truly consider a visionary, and his name was Gene Roddenberry. Now, anyone who recognizes that name knows that Gene Roddenberry was the creator of Star Trek, and that's not entirely why I consider him a visionary, but it is part of it. The reason I think of him in that way is the way he was able to see the future, the way he saw people working together. Now, you got to remember that Star Trek came out in 1966. And in this period of time, there was a lot of racism, a lot of segregation. Women were mostly considered housewives. Some were starting to enter the workplace, but this was not a popularized thing at that point. A lot of people didn't like that. People were skeptical of people that looked different or sounded people if they came from a different country or had a different accent. We were in the middle of the Cold War, and there was always the possibility of war with Russia on hand. And what Gene Roddenberry did at that time was he created the show Star Trek, and it's not even so much to me about the space aspect, it's how he saw these people. He set these people on a spaceship, and he made the crew led by a Caucasian American man, and on his crew was a Russian, a man with a Scottish accent, an African American, and not just an African American, but an African American woman. And this is how he viewed the future, as all these groups of people that didn't necessarily get along at that point in time or didn't necessarily agree with each other at that point in time. And he said, here they are, working together alongside for a common goal. And, you know, to take it even a step further, the other person he added on the ship was an alien. And I know people debate whether or not they believe there's life from outer space, but that isn't even the point. The point is, at that point in time, if you saw an alien on television or if you saw an alien in movies, they were always there to attack us. They were there to wipe out Earth and to kill people and to take us over. But he took an alien and put them right alongside the humans, everybody working together in peace and harmony. And I want to take a moment this month to show you my Mego Mr. Spock figure. Mego was a toy company that started, I believe, in the 1950s, but it became very popular in the 1970s with its line of action figures that covered TV shows, movies, superheroes, both from DC and Marvel comics, and it became a huge selling line. And this is a 1974 Mr. Spock figure. 1974 was the very first line of Star Trek figures released by Mego. They did have a few more that included people like Uhura and Chekhov, but this first line consisted of Captain Kirk, Bones, Scotty, the Klingon, and of course Mr. Spock. And this figure is in very good condition. There is a little bit of a rip here on the front cover, but the card itself is in very good condition. The figure is still sealed in the plastic, so he himself is mint with his little blue phaser. And it's a great figure, both because of how I feel about Gene Roddenberry and because it's a very good show, but it's a great toy that is a great addition to anyone's toy collection, and I'm glad to have it. So we're going to go to commercial, and we'll be back with this month's guest.
Meteorite storm! Scotty, beam us up! Scotty! Scotty!
Don't worry, Captain. It's only a shower.
I don't need a brolly, you wally! Beam us up!
Captain, I haven't got the power.
Try, man, try. Power! More power!
Man's power, man. Uh-oh. Start again.
Well, he certainly hasn't got the power. Good afternoon. But you could have national power and power gen. To register for a prospectus in the generating company's share offers, call 0272 272 272.
All right, well, welcome back. My guest this month is somebody that definitely knows about goals and dreams. He is the author and creator of a new character known as Dragon Frog. Let's welcome Sergio Lazaro.
Good to be here.
Good to see you, man. Now, Sergio and I actually met, if you remember back in October, we had Gary Sommers on talking about Northeast Comic Con.
That's right.
And he was nice enough to give me some passes to the convention. And we're out there, Sergio and I got talking. I'm going to stumble a little bit.
Sergio's good.
Sergio and I got to talking, and his comic book is awesome, Dragon Frog. Tell us a little bit about how you got the idea.
Well, I was in 6th grade detention at the time, and you had to sit
There is
still.
hope for the detention kids. Yeah.
That's right. I'm the shining example.
So it gave you the time to think.
Right, and
Okay.
I thought that I had a little Eraserhead frog in my pocket that I had just bought at a book fair recently, and I just took that out, and it had little bobble eyes. So I popped those out,
bobble eyes,
and I had a little pen, and I put little like Joe Cool glasses on them, like to simulate goggles, and then I darkened them up so that it looked like he had a wetsuit on. And I just basically, that's where it started. I just had these little adventures when nobody was looking.
The darkened suit with the goggles eventually became Dragon Frog, man.
That's right.
Now, so this is well over 30 years ago you first had the idea.
That's right. That's right,
And,
yeah.
you know, this first issue of the comic book, anyway, just came out, when was it, the last few months, right?
Yeah. I mean, it really started in 2003 for me when Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man came out.
Sure.
I was living in New York.
Wire, yep.
Yeah, and I was in Times Square, and I'm watching him in Times Square, and I thought to myself, you know, I never thought about doing a comic book, but I was like, maybe I could put something together. And
But it's
lo
a
and
first
behold.
step. I know you've said that ultimately, you know, you've always visioned Dragon Frog as an animation, as a cartoon.
That's right.
But, you know, it's like we're talking about this month, setting goals, taking that one goal, next goal, next goal, next goal, till you get to the ultimate dream.
Right. I mean, I just simply, George Lucas said in an interview that he never really knew what he was doing. He was just simply doing the things that made him happy and eventually got to his goal. And that's all I've done, is just simply take the steps that make me happy, and here we are.
And now, in the first issue, you don't really go into the origin story. He's already Dragon Frog,
Correct.
which we've seen with a lot of comic books over the year. Batman came in as Batman. Superman came in as Superman. But you do have the origin story to Sid Pollywog, Dragon Frog, written out. Tell us a little bit about the origin, because it's really a cool story.
Well, he's essentially an adolescent frog who lives in a nation city that's called Imperial. And he's strapped with braces and crutches because he has crippled knees.
Yes.
But he dreams about being a hero. And one day he learns about a dragon who heals injuries that are deemed unfixable.
And what you were saying to me that I thought was great earlier is you stopped and thought, what would be the worst thing for a frog, you know, that could happen to a frog, and that he wouldn't be able to use his legs?
Nothing would. It's like a bird whose wings are clipped. A fish who can't swim. You know, for a frog, nothing is worse. They can't jump.
Exactly. So he finds out about this dragon.
Right. He hobbles out on a quest to find him. He finds him, and the dragon teaches him to focus a creative power called Vive.
Vive, yes, V-E-E-V.
That's right, exactly. And it's basically the power of imagination, where imagination is an actual usable energy.
Okay.
He just focuses his thoughts. And of course, you have to attune to the right frequency of it. And once he does, he heals his knees, and then he discovers that he's got all this abundance of power to boost his froggy abilities and get this mega strength, agility, speed.
You know, yeah, it's not just his, all of a sudden he can jump now and his legs work like a frog. Like when we look through issue 1, the comic book ends with him trying to take down a ship, you know, that's up in space, and he's left to leave, and kind of left in that kind of normal comic book kind of cliffhanger thing, where he's up there, and I love the part where just like that, you know, and out go the kind of frog arm things, and he's grabbing a hold of that ship, and he's trying to use the not the forces in Star Wars, but the force of the centrifugal force type thing to get the ship. This is a long way from a frog who had braces on his legs. You know? So yeah, well, he's come a long way by issue 1 already.
Exactly. Yeah, I really thought that, well, thanks to my editor, Nancy Lilly, we decided it was best to just go right into it and then get back to the origin little by little.
Like it's
a
got
prequel.
this spiritual focus. It's this overcoming adversity. I really enjoyed the story. But then the other thing, you just mentioned your publisher, but I'm sorry, just to mention that I haven't actually asked you about this. Lucky Moons. Is that a company you started? Or?
My wife Nancy and I, we put it together just specifically to start publishing Dragon Frog on our own instead of trying to get a distributor. I mean, eventually we'd like to get a distributor, but we put it on ourselves.
So are there plans to put out other people's work as well, or is Lucky Moons kind of focused on Dragon Frog?
It could go that way, sure. I'd love to, down the road. So just have to get a name brand going.
I wanted to mention the illustrator, and his name is Brett
Brooks. Brett Brooks.
Now, what jumped out at me was the illustrations.
Oh, definitely.
The color is just so bright. It reminded me so much of the movie Zootopia.
Right,
Not even just because of the animals, but just the color, the way it's written. It just was very well done.
Well, I imagined it. It's funny. I imagined it Disney-esque, if you will, and I just happened to be extremely lucky that Brett. We put an ad in Craigslist in Boston. He lives in Atlanta, and answered the Boston ad. And lo and behold,
he obviously, I mean,
all by email.
I don't know what your vision was per se, but I mean,
it's pretty
as
close.
As far as I can tell, he's drawn it perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks what you would expect for a superhero frog.
Yeah, I draw the initial characters for him, so he has a base, and some of the technology too, because the technology varies in Dragon Frog. The sash is actually called Dragon Tail.
Okay.
And the sash, if he focuses Vive through it, it can transform into all sorts of weapons. It can be a sword, nunchucks,
I didn't realize
staff. Yeah, because eventually I want to showcase all of that.
Speaking of the tail, just to show it again, we'll do a close-up there. That's the tail that he's talking about.
Yeah, he's using the whip action
like
of
the utility belts, I guess. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. And, I've said it a lot of times, we're Toy Talk, but we're really, the focus is pop culture. It's not necessarily just toys, but you do have some stuff that goes along with Dragon Frog. There's no toys yet, although I want to I want to be one of the first people that gets that action figure when the time comes, man.
I always think about those multi-positional ones with all the articulation.
You need it. I mean, Mego could kind of do it. They have the different joints and stuff. I can't see it as like a kind of arms up and down. He's got to be able to move, man.
Right. I'd rather do the Stretch Armstrong thing than be
kind of cool for him. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, because he's rubbery.
That's not a bad idea. Get that kind of syrupy gel. That wouldn't be as hard to make.
He's very fluid, but, in his actions and everything, and so that's why I imagine him.
Like I said, we don't have the toys yet, but there are some things. You do have the stickers. You got this one and the one that I'm wearing.
Right.
Supporting Dragon Frog here. Temporary tattoos, which are very cool. And now, this guy does not turn up in the first issue, but we've got a pin of him in a little card. Tell us a little bit about this guy here.
That's B-Row Brindle. He's
B-Row?
B-Row. B like B-Row, like R-O-H. Basically, it's bro that I...
Bro, okay, B-Row, got it.
I made it phonetically, yeah.
Got it.
B-Row Brindle.
Okay.
He's Sid's best friend. He's a gearhead with a tow wrecker, and he helps Sid get across town so that he's not spotted by the Imperial Center Force, who are the police units.
Now, that's something we didn't get into that I did read a lot, in the issue that's mentioned a lot, is there's a lot of regulations on how life is there. There's no free flying, no free swimming, no.
Right.
And then you got this guy, this frog that's coming in, jumping around, doing all this stuff to stop the bad guys, so to speak. But I have to imagine, as the issues progress, the police aren't going to be too happy about this guy, even though he's helping capture or stop the bad guys.
Right. Well, there's a rule. It's called the Imperial Harmony Act, and it's for creatures to not use their natural skills in public. No free running, no free flying, no free swimming. It's to basically keep everyone in line, and because basically those are all means for hunting, flying.
I see. Okay, now
jumping.
I get it. Okay.
That's the skills they use to hunt, and so you're not supposed to hunt.
So that they don't kill the other creatures, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay.
And so it's being used as a control. It's really gotten out of hand with the Harmony Act, as any law does eventually.
Yeah.
And Sid just wants none of it. He wants to be a hero. He wants to focus his powers and do what he's always wanted to do, and he's not going to let a little thing like the Harmony Act get in his way.
And I imagine that, the Harmony Act not allowing them to do these things is where a lot of the villains come into place. They're kind of rebelling against these kind of, I mean, the laws are in place to help, to not hurt anybody per se, but they've gotten so over the top that you can't even be yourself. You can't use your natural abilities, you know, as you're saying. So it's kind of a sense where, you know, it was set up for good, and this is what I think happens a lot of times, as you were saying. With laws, sometimes things are set up for good, and they get taken to such an extreme that they become a negative in their attempt to push good, you know?
Right.
And Dragon Frog's trying to change it, and I'm hoping as issues go on, and assuming, you know, he'll come into like some kind of agreement with the, you know, they'll kind of come to see. I don't know. I guess you probably don't even know that. It's those goals step by step.
I know, but
you know,
I can't say.
You know? Yeah. I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, he's just basically, he's not looking to teach anyone. He's just being himself.
Okay.
And whatever comes from that is what plays out in the story.
Sure.
You know, and there's also other creatures who learn to focus Vive for their own ends. You have a chameleon that focuses Vive to change form. You have an eagle that...
Now, are most of these other heroes, or are they villains, or is it kind of a mixture?
Well, it's both. I mean, the villains can focus Vive too.
Okay, yeah.
You know, it's just having access to that imaginative
So
imaginative
this
power.
dragon hasn't been too selective in who he's trained.
No, it's not so much the dragon.
Gotcha. He's just the one that taught. So, yeah.
Exactly. They're just people who have learned on their own, or had another teacher who's taught how to focus Vive for
sure.
their own ends.
I mean, talking about like how it's an energy field and everything, even pulling back to like when we've talked about Star Wars, you know, we had the guys like Yoda and Obi-Wan who trained the Jedi, but then on the flip side, you had the Emperor and the people that are training the Sith.
Right.
You know, so it's still that same energy field or same force, but you can use it for good or bad.
Right. That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is some great stuff, man. I look forward. Do you have you've started working on issue 2? It's not ready to be released yet.
Right. It's still in production.
In production. Now, I do know the first issue was put together with a Kickstarter.
Right.
You know, funding to do that, and I know the goal is to get to the point where the issues are paying. You know, like again, goals, step by step. You know, as we're talking about the next goal, I would, you know, would be to be able to get the magazines to pay for the next issue.
Right.
And eventually, you know, get to the point that they're bringing in some money. So I definitely want to encourage people that are out there. It really is a good magazine. It's a good comic book. You're going to like it. It's up there with some of the well-known ones you've named, both the storyline and the animation, the quality. And I want to encourage you guys, go out and get a copy, because they run for I think it's $3.99 for digital and $4.99 in print, correct? And everything that goes toward that, you know, is going toward putting out the future issues. So Dragon Frog it's going to be initially a 6-issue run. Is that correct?
I'm slated for 6 issues, yeah, and then I'd like to continue as far as I can.
Beyond the first story is going to wrap in 6 issues. Like we talked about, possibly doing a graphic novel.
Right.
The origin, and again, of course, you want to eventually see Dragon Frog become animation.
TV and movies.
Yeah.
You know, that's what
I've seen, you know, one of the comments I've seen a lot online is that a lot of people have said that they think it reminds them of the Ninja Turtles. Yeah. I don't know if that's because it's a frog and a turtle or what it was. There's similarities. I saw it more.
They're both green.
I think they're a different story, you know. But you know, I think it's the amphibious.
Well, we're also
kind of thing, but, you know.
I mean, this was the home of, you know, where they were created, you know, in Massachusetts and New England, and so I think that that's probably part of it, and which I find.
But either way,
it's humbling. You know, it's great to follow those footsteps.
I think it's got its own feel, though.
Oh yeah, definitely. Ninja
Turtles is great, but it's one thing, and Dragon Frog is a little different. I just really love the whole overcoming adversity, you know, and just trying to do the right thing, and the whole energy field. It's just a great book. I'm enjoying the first issue. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy future ones, and it's been great having you on the show, Sergio.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll have you back another time, and we'll see you again next month on Toy Talk.
Teenage Mutant